Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Eric Heffernan. I'm a principal with Grant Thornton. I am very pleased to welcome you all to our today's viewcast, which I'll be hosting, entitled Category Management, an End-to-End Transformation in Federal Procurement. Today's viewcast is intended to be as interactive as possible. We have two mechanisms by which you can interact with myself and the panelists. The first is you can simply tweet us in the hashtag noted below the screen here, and that hashtag is transform through CM. The hashtag will be displayed throughout today's presentation. You can also ask questions at any time by entering those questions in the question form below and simply hitting submit. We'll be sure to allow for ample time towards the end of today's discussion to answer and address any questions that you may have. I would just like to level set the audience a bit here on category management for those of you who might be new to this initiative. Category management is a process data-driven approach to procurement with the intended benefit to increase interaction with suppliers and buyers, better understand their chosen markets, better understand spend within specific sets of products and services, but overall to act as an accelerant to optimizing the efficiency and effectiveness of overall procurement operations. So with that being said, it's with great pleasure that I'd like to introduce the audience to our first panelist, Mr. Mark Day. Mark is the Deputy Assistant Commissioner to the Office of Integrated Technology Services within the U.S. General Services Administration. Mark, would you mind giving the audience a brief intro to your background, but also, more importantly, your role currently implementing category management?
Sure, Eric. Thank you. As Eric said, I'm the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Integrated Technology Services with GSA. I come to that job from what might be a unique perspective. I've spent 30 years in the CIO community, public and private, and found that acquisition was often one of the key elements of any CIO initiative, was being able to acquire the goods and services we needed to carry out our work. And so I came to GSA's acquisition arm in order to bring subject matter expertise to that endeavor. And my role in category management in ITS is one of leading the thinking about how do we actually implement category management and turn it into reality to drive value and efficiency for our customers and to make us better buyers for the government.
Thank you, Mark. I'd now like to introduce a second member of our panel, Mr. Alan Shavodkin. Alan is the Executive Vice President and Counsel with the Professional Services Council. Alan, could you do the same for our audience, provide a brief background, as well as maybe give us a unique perspective in terms of how PSC views the category management initiative in general?
Well, Eric, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to participate. Professional Services Council is a national trade association. We have over 400 member companies, all of whom sell professional and technical services to the federal government. So we focus very clearly and frequently on the government's procurement practices. And category management is one of those tools that is being used by many of the federal agencies to look at what they're buying, particularly in the services world, and how to leverage that spend to maximize the value for the government. From the association standpoint, we're interested in understanding how the government is going to use those tools. We're interested in making sure that our member companies are well aware of how those tools are being used. And we're both an educator for our members, a facilitator of the activities that go on, the interchange with government agencies. And last but certainly not least, we're an advocate for our membership on these topics.
Thank you, Alan. Just to reiterate the objectives that we have for this viewcast, really two objectives. One is to give a pragmatic and practical point of view around how to effectively implement category management in the federal space. Category management is very popular within industry as a commercial best practice. So we want to talk through some practical and pragmatic perspectives on category management. In addition, we're going to the premise that category management is an initiative that's here to stay because it makes a difference. So we want to talk about some of the critical success factors for implementing category management. So with that in mind, Why don't we go ahead and get started with some detailed questions. Mark, we'll go ahead and start with you. I'll start with a very obvious question. Why does category matter for ITS, Mark?
Well, ITS, for those who don't know, is the largest reseller by some counts of IT services to the federal government, and as a result also a large buyer. And category management is a means by which we hope to improve and know we will improve both the quality of our buy, the quality of our service to our customers, and the efficiency and effectiveness of that buying practice. At the end of the day, category management is a means to an end, which is a better service to our customers.
Thank you, Mark. Alan, we'll kind of tee a question up for you at this point. Obviously the current administration is behind category management as a government-wide initiative. I ask, in your opinion, what is category management's true potential to fundamentally or potentially fundamentally transform federal procurement? I'm just interested in your thoughts there.
Well, I appreciate that, because we don't view category management as strictly a procurement tool. It is a better buying practice, and while there are certainly elements that are government-wide, there are 10 categories that the Office of Management and Budget has described as having government-wide application. Many agencies, GSA, Department of Defense, and others have additional areas for their attention, because what category management is at its core is a spend analysis. It's understanding what you're buying, what you have bought in the past, how to leverage that spend in the future. So it really marries together the past, but more importantly, it's a prospective approach to how the government can buy goods and services. And in our case, we look very carefully at that range of services offerings and how category management can play into that. So is it transformational? It can be. It can be if it gets the government to think about a different way of looking at how it allocates its scarce resources. If it does that through smart spend analysis and smart buying practices, then it truly will be transformational. But it takes work, takes education, and it takes effort.
Sure. Mark, I mean, do you have any comments on that in terms of, yes, it serves as a foundational principle, but at the end of the day, it's very process-driven and things need to be done to accomplish the objectives. Any point of view?
Well, sure. As Alan said, this is all about, it's a potential tool. we can do it. It's a tool that helps us focus, becoming smarter buyers, as Alan described it. How do we get smarter about what we buy? How do we understand the markets we're buying in? How do we understand what the vendors need as part of the transaction? How do we understand what we need better? How do we consolidate our buying better and leverage our spend better? It's all about smarter consumers make better consumers. And so this is a real potential transformative effort, but like any silver bullet, it takes lots of work and it takes lots of attention, and the people who execute it are really the secret.
That's an excellent point. So we talked about the importance of data-driven decision-making and efficient decision-making, certainly from the buyer side, right? Having a fundamental understanding of to the transactional details in the past and the history to hopefully forecast the future. What we haven't talked about, and I'll open notes up to you, Mark, is the role that the supplier plays in category management. A lot of what we've talked about is very focused on the internal procurement organizations, processes that need to be established to be effective in implementing category management. But is there any or an important role that the suppliers can play in this initiative?
Absolutely. We often talk about, and this is something that's been an ongoing conversation in the federal government for some time, the open dialogue between the buyer and the seller. We as government need to encourage the ability of suppliers to actually talk to us about their markets and help us understand what actually drives success in the market from their perspective, so that we are much smarter buyers. We understand how to interact with them on terms that make sense to them, that allow them to be most successful in providing the service to us, understand what services we're actually looking for, so that they're actually in a position to invest their scarce dollars in the right places to actually meet our needs on an ongoing basis. And that's a lot of that data-driven part. Do we know what we've been buying? Do we know collectively across multiple agencies or multiple bureaus what we've been buying? Do we know where the buying trends are? Can we help industry know where we're going so that they're in a position to respond proactively, and they're in a position to help educate us on how their market works and how to be most successful in approaching their market?
If I could just add on that as well, and I agree with Mark on that, but often there's a misunderstanding that category management is a contracting technique, and it is nothing to do about how the government goes out and buys goods and services. What category management is a spend analysis. It's an analysis of how to meet needs, and that's why both understanding the agency's needs and understanding the capabilities of the vendor community to meet those needs is so critical. I wish we could be assured that there is greater communication in advance of any procurement, because that's where category management can have its greatest success.
Yes.
Is there anything, Mark, around the specific way in which ITS is choosing to implement category management that would be a specific action or planning for planning purposes that would yield the kind of benefits that we're talking about with greater engagement with industry and with the supplier base?
Sure. One of the reasons why category management is important to ITS is we've identified that there's a core missing element, if you will, in so many of the procurement activities of the federal government at times. Let's talk about what procurement actually looks like in its concept. A program office of some sort has a need, a requirement that they need to fulfill. That needs to be translated into language that an acquisition expert can actually execute in terms of a contract. It needs to be translated into requirements that the vendor community can actually understand and respond to and have, a real clarity about what they're trying to provide back so that they know what they're going to do. Well, we've discovered in ITS that often what we need is subject matter expertise, where we have someone who knows the industry, knows IT, and is able to actually help translate from the requirements of a program to the contracting techniques that are used to actually create contracts. That means someone who can do market research, someone who understands the technology needs of the customer and understands the contractual techniques that are available under the FAR. So we've started to identify that subject matter expertise needs to be married with acquisition expertise. A couple of good examples of where that happens. We have a SATCOM program, commercial satellites. We've discovered that as we were able to bring subject matter experts and acquisition experts together, work with our customer, in this case DISA, we were able to significantly reduce the procurement time for them, increase the validity of the requirements we put on the contract so that it was more valuable to the defense community, and it's as a result gained a very large majority of the buy in the federal government because it became a best practice vehicle that actually met the needs of the customer.
And Mark, is that as a result of aligning that acquisition side as well as the program subject matter expert side around a category, which in this case happens to be telecommunications?
Right.
That's transparent potentially to the buyer,
Right.
but behind the scenes, ITS is working to create a market
Yes.
that aligns to those categories. Is that fair?
Well, and that's a good comment. So if you think about it, IT itself is a category. But what we've discovered is that within the IT category, there are a great many subcategories, and the markets are rather discrete markets. A software market is very different than the telecommunications market, which is quite different than, let's say, professional services, IT engineering market. Because these markets are quite different, we've found that subject matter experts who really understand these markets and really understand what the vendors are doing in the space, understand leading practices, and understand the acquisition rules that we operate under, make an effective third party to that conversation between the requirements owner and the contracting officer who has to turn it into legal procurements.
And that's why those of you who are familiar with the federal acquisition regulation recognize that market research comes before an acquisition strategy. Part 6 comes before Part 7, yes. More than just in numbers. And both 6 and 7 come before you get to any conversation about how to acquire. parts 13, 14, and 15. So very logical and very important. And the extent to which the category management can build off that and understand not only where we've been in the past, but more importantly, what are the future needs and how the markets are changing to accommodate that. Where's the innovation coming? Where are the new products and services coming? Because if all we're doing is going to continue to look to buy in the future everything we've bought in the past, we'll be rapidly missing out on great opportunities to save money to fulfill customer needs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So just a key word to tag onto that, Alan, is past and things of the past. OFPP has put out some memos, and a strong element of category management, in addition to the spend data, is also supplier performance data. There's been a increased emphasis on current data that is available to contracting officers, but a much heavier emphasis on performance data. How do you think the government buyers can better use supplier performance data to make more informed business decisions on a go-forward basis?
Well, past performance, I've always said, and it's not my line, but past performance is an indicator of future performance. And so to the extent that the government can capture quality past performance information that's relevant and timely and meaningful, then it can be a useful additional source of information in looking at future requirements and whether individual vendors are able to fulfill government needs. But too often we're getting to a procedural perfection checklist of that, homogenizing the past performance information. So I'm very concerned, and from an advocacy standpoint on behalf of our members, that we're undercutting the value of past performance by making it a checklist or a simple scorecard of work, rather than drilling down into the real capabilities and the real performance issues.
Do you think just forecasting or prognosticating that under category management, where there's that better alignment to the industry, the suppliers that they serve, better understanding those buying behaviors and understanding who is successful, who are the innovators, who are the up-and-comers in that market, that will hopefully yield better use of that data? Or?
Well, it certainly can, but again, as Mark properly said, each of these submarkets have their own biorhythms and their own experiences, and they change rapidly. The wireless market of 5 years ago that I'm still living in is not the wireless market that exists today. And so it's important to stay on top of those evolutions that are taking place in both in government and in industry. And I'm again fearful that we're going to hold on to systems because it's easy to record the past than we are going to train a workforce where the technical community to stay current with the needs of the future.
Okay, thank you.
And let me add to that. I think one of the things that you see changing in ITS that we're trying to do to address this innovation question and how past performance affects that. If you're watching the Federal Register, you'll notice that we've put out for comment the idea that perhaps we ought not to have a 2-year period for past performance and commerciality to go onto the schedules program. Are there other ways to allow innovators who have new leading edge products to get into the schedule and get into the federal space while having other mechanisms to make sure that they're viable providers to the government? And so that's an interesting question. How do we get the innovators in and yet have some ability to predict that they have the ability to fulfill the market space when we do make a purchase from them? And this is an interesting tension to balance these two issues.
Mark, you're absolutely right, and it's absolutely important to understand that. One of the solutions that we've proposed in other areas of GSA is to look at success in the commercial marketplace. So many solicitations have relied exclusively on past performance in the federal marketplace as an indicator of future success in the federal marketplace. And so many of these companies have great success in the commercial marketplace that can also be value. The challenge, of course, is there's no readily available database of that past performance in the commercial marketplace. Sure. So there are some tensions, but there are also some solutions. And if we looked at how to address the capabilities rather than do we have the right box to check or form to fill out, we might do a better job of that market research ability.
So an intended byproduct to getting to the gist of what we're saying here is that a better understanding of those chosen markets will help the buying community understand what innovations industry has to offer and a better understanding of that. I'll get to a slightly controversial. I'm jumping around a bit here, but I think it's in the same area, which is if we're getting access to if the intended benefit is getting access to innovative companies. One of the other areas of concern is under a category management framework where you're looking at spend as a primary data point is the issue around small business and other socioeconomic businesses. How under category management, Mark, do you think category management could actually serve as a tool to help actually obtain more insight to socioeconomic goals as well as small business objectives?
Well, sure, and I'm sure that this is an issue that has caused grave concern for some of our small business partners, a concern that perhaps this focus on consolidation and leverage might be disadvantageous to them. But let me say that from our perspective, better market research helps us uncover suppliers who we might not otherwise know about. Better spend analysis helps us find those who maybe have done a good job in some space that we weren't aware of. And so category management's focus on market research is, I think, very positive for small business. In addition, we have as a standard metric for all of our category management efforts, meet or improve the small business percentage that we do today. And so that's actually something we're keeping track of, something we watch in our category management plans, which we do annually. We actually look at the question, how can we improve small business participation in this category, open up the door for the innovative suppliers, open up the doors for those who maybe have some new ideas, new ways of doing things, so they can bring them to the market.
And this is, I agree with Mark, and there are a number of techniques available, and this is why it's important to separate out category management as a spend analysis and an analytical tool from the procurement process. There are concerns about strategic sourcing. Strategic sourcing is a procurement technique that intentionally is designed to limit the number of suppliers given for a particular market or limit the amount of time available. And so there are a number of vendors, large and small, who are adversely affected by that. Understanding where the market trends are can still give you plenty of access and still put the responsibility on the procurement community, on the contracting community, to make sure that small businesses have the opportunity to participate in those procurements. If given that opportunity, I'm a strong proponent of small business. I've got a whole career of supporting small business opportunities. I have no doubt that they'll be fully capable and come to the marketplace if the marketplace is open to them.
Right. Alan, you mentioned strategic sourcing. Oftentimes we hear in industry category management being synonymous or aligned to strategic sourcing or other government-wide initiatives, even things such as shared services. Mark, what from your perspective really differentiates category management from strategic sourcing or maybe other government-wide initiatives that you've been a part of?
Well, I think we're all familiar with the crawl, walk, run paradigm in which we mature as we do anything. And this is an example. Strategic sourcing was an effort to improve our spend analysis. It was an effort to say, let's not duplicate the acquisition activity. Let's try to be more efficient, more effective. Category management is the next evolution of the learning. And if I could, I would say it's the run instead of the walk or crawl. We're starting to really understand the totality of the different practices that come together to actually improve our acquisition. The data analysis, the market research, the ability for government agencies to work together when we have common needs, and the ability to open up so that the marketplace actually knows what we're trying to buy. Category management is really the fulfillment of a lot of different efforts over time that taught us different things, helped expose there's some good, some bad, what are the good parts, what are the bad parts, and category management is harvesting the totality of everything we've learned going in the past.
And it's changing the way industry is looking at government as well. It's no longer enough for a company or a segment of the marketplace to sit back and just wait for government to come to them. This is the communications. It's got to be two ways. Industry has got to be willing to come forward and share with government on a technical basis as well as with the procurement folks where their markets are going, where their future product offerings are coming, so that, again, we're not just simply looking through the rearview mirror, but looking forward in how we can take advantage of the understandings to better meet and fulfill the future needs of the government.
Okay, great. So along with category management, there's been a lot of activity, a lot of productivity in the enabling technology that will more broadly support category management as a business process. Alan, I'm interested in your perspective in terms of what are some of the benefits and risks that are associated with some of the increased transparency that initiatives or enabling technology such as the acquisition gateway will provide industry and the buyers, particularly around prices paid, other contract terms and conditions, draft statements of work. Thoughts on that acquisition gateway?
I certainly do. And I've shared those thoughts regularly with policymakers across the government. Again, category management as a tool. The data analytics that the government has to undertake comes from two sources. Primarily, in our view, it should come from information the government already has. And they collect a vast amount of information from vendors, not only the prices offered, but the prices actually awarded. And so to the extent that the government has that data, they ought to find a way to put it in a usable form or collect it in a way that it can be shared by others. I'm a big fan of collect data once and use it many times. And category management is really an epitome of that. The counterbalance to that is it exposes an individual vendor's information to a very broad audience. It's no longer a one-on-one transaction, but it's a transaction from one to many. And that can be a little scary from the vendor community because there's questions about accuracy. How will the data be used or misused? How do you take into account not only the price paid, but the circumstances under which that price was offered? The period of performance, the location where that work was done, the special terms and conditions that were established around that buying activity. So simply looking at price can actually divert smart buying. It can be really a disabler rather than an enabler for many government officials. And so the tension, again, in the marketplace is how do you make data available for analytical purposes that is robust enough that you can understand the context in which that data is provided.
Yeah, so context matters for sure.
Context matters a lot.
So Mark, is there anything that can be done to prevent those risks or those uncertainties?
Well, sure. A lot of this comes down to how do we educate the users of the data. So if let's assume for the moment that we've collected the data, we've put it in a usable form, and we've provided context such as what are the outliers, what is the median and the mean, how do we see the distribution of the prices. These are all statistical concepts that actually can help provide context even when you can't do the individual terms and conditions of a contract. Educating the buyer so that they are able to understand. I'm looking at, well, that's the lowest price, but it was only paid one time out of 50 buys. Yet there's a median price that was paid. There's a very high price that was paid. It gives the buyer a range, a triage, if you will, for their pricing activity, for them to understand what's a reasonable cost estimate. We have to help them understand that this is a tool to help refine your pricing and understanding of the market. It is not an absolute guide. It is simply triage. Now you have to go and do some more research, but at least you have a starting point. You understand the top and bottom of the market. You understand where the median part of the market is, and now you can go out and work with your vendors to really understand what drove those different prices. Is this price, let's say for labor, being driven by the fact that you want to classify a person with an SCI clearance working in Alaska? Well, that price point's a little different than somebody working in, say, Rolla, Missouri, where I come from, who's working unclassified work. But those are kinds of conversations you can have with the vendors if you understand the pricing models that are out there. Then you can sit down and say, well, what drove this price to be so different? And you can actually have a much more robust conversation, and you can understand how to make sure that what you're asking for is what you actually need to do your job. And you're not just asking for requirements that sound like the right thing to ask for, and that you'll actually understand the pricing implications of the things you ask for.
Okay.
And to Mark's analogy of crawl, walk, run, unfortunately, in many cases, we go from zero to running. And the differentiation I would use is between pure commodities if you're buying a tangible product versus high-end professional services like ITS buys. World of difference. The former CEO of Lockheed Martin, Norm Augustine, once said that there's a significant difference between 20 engineers with 1 year's experience and one engineer with 20 years experience. And so if all you're buying is engineering experience, you might very easily mask over those kinds of differences. Professional services, some of the other high-end technology areas may not be easily suitable yet for that category management analysis. Not to say there's no role at all, but we're not at the run stage yet in that area.
Using the analogy of crawl, walk, run, Mark, several of our audience members might be part of a much smaller buying organization than ITS, but might be interested or intrigued as category management, not just the government-wide initiative, but as a means to either redefine their core procurement processes or maybe even their organizational structure. I know ITS is design things organizationally for an intended purpose, but for our audience members, are there any tangible activities or efforts that you could speak to in terms of aligning to category management that they might benefit from understanding?
Sure. There's a number of things people can do. One, I think every agency benefits from doing a spend analysis of their own to say, what have we been buying? Where are the greatest opportunities? And that's where are you spending your money, typically? And starting to say, well, we have 500 contracts for this one commodity. That probably is not an effective buying process. So starting to look at the number of transactions versus the dollars versus the subject matter and understanding that in an agency so that you can begin to organize and be a best buyer for yourself. That's a smart piece. Second, you can go to our category hallways. We're putting up more and more material that illustrates different types of buys, different ways to buy, leading best practices from practitioners in the marketplace that talk about different things they've done, so you can do your research there. Third, come to the government-wide enterprise vehicles. Not just GSA, we have competitors also in the market, but there are places where we've begun to leverage the best practices in certain areas, and in those areas it makes sense to come consult with us. We have experts who will be happy to sit down with an agency, explain what we're doing, why we've done it the way we've done it, and if it meets their needs, help them do it with our vehicle. And if it doesn't meet our needs, frankly, we'll be willing to say, and here's the best practice we know about anywhere in the government at this point in time, and help our customers, because at the end of the day, GSA's mission is to help the government be a better buyer. And whether that's through us or anybody else, our mission in law is to help the government be a better buyer.
That's great. Alan, I'll turn a question to you. Obviously, we have a upcoming presidential transition, and you probably have been through several of these, maybe a few more than I have.
Look that old?
No, I didn't.
I've read about them.
I didn't. You've read about them, but obviously you've seen these types of government-wide initiatives during these types of transitions. Are there any lessons learned that we should be focused in ensuring the success of category management, or any perspective you'd like to offer?
Yeah, but I think there's a couple of lessons from these, and we go through transitions all the time, different GSA administrators to different presidents to different Congresses, and the focus is always a little different. There's not a single transition or incoming administration or incoming administrator that's not interested in maximizing the benefits to the agency and maximizing the spend that the government makes. So being that advocate, not only within GSA, but among the buying activities and the vendor community is really a critical success factor to longevity. The more these become labeled as a presidential initiative or somebody's unique great idea, as opposed to the great ideas of others, the less likely it is to have sustainability. The more challenging the budget is, the greater these kinds of tools and analytics become more important. When spending was rising on federal contracting in the year from the first decade of this century, there was less attention to category management because money wasn't a problem. As it's been tighter and more challenging, these kinds of tools and techniques and leveraging the spend become more important. So I think focusing on that and making sure that there is a broad agreement among the entire acquisition community, both government, the buying community, and the vendor community, is really the key to success.
Mark, any thoughts on that?
Sure. I agree with everything Alan just said, and I want to add a couple of thoughts from somebody who's been personally inside these transitions multiple times in a career. And yes, I am that old, and yes, I do have the gray hair. Look to the substance. Forget the labels, look to the substance. What are we substantively trying to do? What are the improvements we're trying to make? Substance will move across administrations, they will move across political appointees, and they will help you focus on the mission you're performing. We get caught up in the label and new initiative, new name, who gets credit for it, and frankly, everybody who comes in as part of a new administration needs to have an initiative that they get credit for. That's part of why they're there. Mm-hmm. That's not a pejorative comment. That is why they're there. They're trying to drive things to success. We, on the career side, need to be very careful to look at the substance and take the substance of it and run with it and bring it to fruition and make it real. Because then the value is realized, the initiative is successful because the value is realized. And that will transition across initiatives if we present it substantively. If we get caught up in the labels, then frankly, it gets caught up in who gets credit, and that's never a winner.
Mm-hmm. So Mark, in terms of getting back specifically to ITS and the transformation that ITS is going forward, we talked a lot about the benefits of category management in terms of better transparency of data, better understanding of spend, better relationship with suppliers, the benefits to small business and other innovative companies. But what are some of the maybe more intangible benefits associated with moving towards category management as an operating principle that people may not have heard out there in the public sphere?
Well, there are a couple of things that people might miss that maybe it's even counterintuitive. One, the greater your knowledge as a buyer, as a subject matter expert of a particular market, and the greater value you can bring, it actually enhances your career value. It enhances your career path. Becoming an expert not just in how the federal acquisition regulations apply, but how they apply to software. Becoming an expert, for example, in enterprise user licenses and understanding how they can be best negotiated, how they can be best applied on a federal-wide basis, comply with federal law. If you're an expert in a particular area, that enhances your value. And so for the employees who are wondering, is this a good thing for my career? The answer is yes, it actually is a good thing for your career. This is an ability to distinguish where you have expertise. This is an ability to distinguish where you have multiple expertise areas. It allows you to provide a clear understanding of your value proposition beyond just what's the level of my warrant or I've been, a grade this or a grade that. This is actually demonstrating value in a level of expertise. And that makes it easier to go out to the market, whether you're going in private sector or public sector and other places. I think for the vendors, it is very much an open door to really come have a conversation with us that maybe we haven't always been open to. And maybe we haven't always had a good forum for that conversation. And Alan, I think, mentioned earlier, it is incumbent on industry to come talk to us. Where are we going? What do you see as the new products? What does the commercial market want from you? And this is, I think, one of the hidden issues in category management. 50 years ago, in the IT industry, when the government said jump, IT industry basically said how high, because we were such a large buyer. We weren't just the largest buyer, we were the majority buyer. In many cases, we were 40, 50% of their market. And so where we wanted to go was, in fact, where the market was going. Today, in a highly commercialized market, we might be the largest buyer and only still be 2%. And so we now need to understand where you see the commercial market taking you. And that's really an open door for the vendor community under category management to come really have an audience that wants to understand what they're doing. So I think it's got potential on both sides of the equation.
And from industry, this is a secret now, so don't share it. But for industry, this is an opportunity to shape a market.
Yeah.
Yes.
By being forthcoming, by giving some insight into where you're going, that it may not only be your product, but the ability to shape where the government's attitudes and approaches are well into the future. It also provides an opportunity for you to be an honest resource for the government. Because of all the challenges we know in not only the acquisition workforce, but the technology workforce. Today in the federal government, there are 10 times as many federal employees over 50 as under 30. Mm-hmm. That's a scary thought for me. It ought to be for everybody. So the government is always looking for those resources. And if you can engage in that dialogue, where you're going is a technical matter, where the markets are going, can have enormous impact for the good. Both for your company as well as for the government.
Right.
So Mark, as category management matures specifically for ITS, and the way that ITS goes to market now, primarily through their programs, their schedules, the GWACs, how do you see, or do you foresee any changes in the programs and the contracts that are now available and that alignment to category management?
Well, we do see a maturing process that's occurring, and let me give you an example of that. Today we have contracts, and I'll use a couple of examples. You can buy telecom under Schedule 70. You can buy telecom under Alliant. You can buy telecom under Networks. But don't make the mistake of thinking those are duplicate buys. Schedule 70 is commercial. These are what is happening in the commercial market, and the terms and conditions are based around the commercial market very strongly. In the Networks contract, this is a contract where we've done a great deal of market research, and we are focused on the telecom market and what are the terms and conditions. For example, good inventory practices, understanding the complete inventory of all the circuits that are available to an agency. That is a contract that is focused on the best possible practices in telecom purchasing. Alliant, you can buy telecom, but you buy it as part of a bigger solution. I would not recommend you go there to buy telecom for your agency as a whole. And so what we're discovering is that there are markets that require discrete buying patterns. Cloud is the latest one that we're looking at. Should we have a cloud-only contract? And I say only not because we would only sell that. We would provide the full range of solutions there, but it would be focused on cloud. It would have terms and conditions that are unique to the cloud business model, that recognizes the cloud business model is a different business model than, say, buying hardware or buying software licenses and intellectual property. So we are discovering that we need these broad contracts that provide solutioning in the undifferentiated market where a customer can come in and do what's right for their particular need. And then we're also discovering there are places where we need very category-specific contracts that are focused on the terms and conditions that maximize the value of that particular category. And you're going to see a mix of those things as we learn which markets demand which type of approach and which markets demand both approaches so that customers can correctly build the right solution for their problem.
The two issues that we see on the vendor side or from the association side. First of all, there is of enormous confusion in the marketplace about these. We don't have the clarity the way Mark just described it, as if he were able to be the oracle for not oracle company, but the voice for government-wide. That clarity is lacking today, and we need to make that very clear. Secondly, we're continuing to buy the old-fashioned way, and to GSA's credit, to ITS's credit, they're changing the way they're going to market with their contracts. No longer all just commercial terms and conditions, no longer all just fixed-price contracts or all type cost type. So the use of hybrid contracts, driving the business to the lowest level possible through task order contracting and others. Very, very important, and it's a technique that needs to be replicated across the government. We can't just focus on the shiny new objects. There's got to be, category management is not about buying the hottest topic or the hottest item for today. Category management is a long-term view. It takes into account where the agency has been, but as I said earlier, more importantly, where it's going in the future. And so there has to be that new learning taking place, and I'm concerned we're not there yet.
Okay, thank you. We did receive a few questions via the forum, so I wanted to offer those up to the group. And Mark, I think the first question we have here might align to some of the things that you've discussed. How do niche innovations enter the market through category management, specifically in the cybersecurity, information security business?
Well, there's a number of ways in which innovators can get into this market. So let's talk about a couple of things. One, connect up with the category managers and their teams in the various areas. So for example, we have a category manager for the security cyberspace. They're interested in what are the innovations going on. In fact, we have a couple of innovation areas that we're pursuing right at the moment, where a brand new company has some very innovative thoughts about how to do something that we need. So talk to your category managers that are actually out in this space trying to understand the market. This market research venue is open. Not everybody's doing it perfectly, not everybody gets it perfectly, but there is a great interest in driving in this space. Second, team up with partners. There are people on the big GWACs who are looking for innovators to work as subs. And you don't always want to be a sub, I understand that, but it's a great way to get in the door and understand the federal marketplace and to become part of that marketplace and gain some expertise and understanding how the rhythms work in that space. And the rhythms are a little different than they are in the commercial space. Deals don't happen as quickly. On the other hand, if you're a successful vendor, the government tends to stick with you because you've been successful. And so the rhythms are different, you need to learn that. Third, look at what we've put out for comment on Schedule 70 about getting in faster through other means for Schedule 70. There are a number of agencies who have leadership for cybersecurity with the specific. DHS, Homeland Security, is doing work in cybersecurity. They're interested in who the innovators are. So look at who the people are who have the lead for the government, find out who they are, connect with them, and help them see the innovation that you bring to the table. And if I can make a plea to any of my vendor partners, don't come in and say, how can I help you? Do your homework, understand what we've said publicly, understand where the market's going, and come in and show us how you can address a problem we've got.
The second question, I think we already addressed this, but maybe to put the point home is how category management analysis or spend analysis maybe is being balanced with small business objectives, maybe just to reiterate that.
Well, I think that, as we've said, small business analysis is a part of our category management analysis. Right. We have small business goals. We intend to meet or exceed those goals and improve each year. And so we do focus a great deal on making sure that our data analysis actually helps us uncover new sources and new providers who might be part of the solution.
Great. So I think we have around 10 minutes less, so I do have a series of kind of rapid fire questions here, a la maybe some of the presidential debates. So really looking for just a short, kind of brief statements on the question. And Alan, we'll go ahead and start with you. If you had to choose one critical success factor for category management, what would that be?
The extent to which it's adopted by the federal agencies, by the buying activities. So again, this is not a procurement issue, this is an analytical issue. And so to the extent that agencies are taking advantage of the tools available to do that spend analysis in the major categories where they are spending their money today, that will be the best indicator I can think of that category management has arrived.
What is the biggest benefit that category management can provide to industry?
The biggest benefit is market opportunities. And ultimately, companies have products and services they want to sell to the government, and the ability to communicate that capability to to the government is critical.
Here's a softball one. Should industry be given access to the acquisition gateway?
Absolutely. Again, there's no reason not to. You want to make sure that the information that the government has available to it is current, complete, and accurate. I'll borrow a phrase else from other parts of the acquisition regulation. And so there's a great deal of consternation in the industry that the sources of information may be too limited or out of date. And so if we share a goal of having current, complete, and accurate information available to help an agency make a smarter buying decision, then you want to make sure that you have those that validation. And the best way to get that is from the people who also have similar access to the data, and that's the vendor community.
Is there anything that can be done to better generate buy-in from industry?
I think there's some education that still needs to be done. God bless GSA, they've done a great job. There's never a meeting that they're not willing to come to try to explain what's going on. But it's not just a GSA issue. And well, the GSA is a leader in the buying activities, particularly around some of the commodities and schedules program and telecommunications. There are multiple. The Defense Department has 10 additional category management areas that they're focused in over and above the 10. GSA has 19 categories, 10 government-wide and 9 additional within the agency. So looking at that across the government, not government-wide, but how the individual agencies are doing that is the right answer to me.
Your biggest concern in implementing category management?
Biggest concern is that it will be used as a viewed as the analytics will drive to a view that everything is a commodity, and therefore the only thing that matters is price. And so there'll be no differentiation among vendors, no differentiation among markets, and particularly in the technology area, no differentiation among capabilities. Everybody will be treated the same, and therefore the only difference is price. That will be a huge failure from an industry standpoint.
Okay, thanks. All right, Mark, now it's your turn. We'll put you on the hot seat. If you had to choose one critical success factor for this initiative, what would that be?
Sound education for the professionals who have to engage in this work, and making sure the buying activity, the contracting officer, the subject matter expert, we really focus on this core concept: understand the market, understand what you're buying. And if we really help them understand how to do that successfully, have a deeper knowledge, then this will be a successful initiative.
Okay. When implementing category management, as ITS has, what's better, top-down or bottom-up?
Well, actually, you do both. Top-down says, here's the vision, here's where we're trying to go, here's the goals, and bottom-up are an awful lot of ideas bubble up. For example, our commercial satellite program was not a category management effort in its initiation, but as we looked at what that team did, a very small team, we said, wow, there's a lot of good ideas here that actually drive category management to be more successful. And so it is, in fact, both sides working together, both ends working against the middle, if you will.
Mm-hmm. When implementing category management, if you had to place an order of importance, what would be that order? People, process, and technology?
Yes, you just got it.
Oh, I
Because
did?
it's the people. At the end of the day, I've never known an initiative in the federal government to fail because the technology couldn't do the job. The vendors and the technologists in the government can find a way to make the technology work if we can solve the people issues, and then if we can figure out how the process, and particularly scorekeeping, whether that's budget scorekeeping or other types of scorekeeping, make sure that those things are aligned with the goal, and then make sure the people understand and embrace what they're doing. We'll be successful.
So what do you see as the largest benefit to procurement organizations as a result of category management?
We will be better buyers for the public. We will spend the public's dollars better. We'll provide better mission accomplishment as we get smarter as buyers.
And the last would be, what is your biggest concern in implementing category management?
That we, as Alan put it much earlier, that we don't allow this to become an initiative du jour. We don't allow it to be captured as any one person's initiative, This is actually something that we've learned is a great practice in the commercial market, and we're bringing it to the government. And I don't care if you give it a new name and you give it a new glossy cover and you put new memos out about it. Substantively, are we becoming smarter buyers?
Great. So just in closing, I'll make a few closing remarks here. It sounds like we can all kind of celebrate the successes that category management has in the early infancy stages. Obviously, there's a lot of work to go. There's a foundation to build upon here that I think it's going to require increased collaboration between industry, the buying organizations, as well as the marketplaces that are being set. But I want to thank both Mark, Alan, and GovExec obviously for serving as one of the critical success factors you both highlighted was education around category management, demystifying it as a process and enabling process to procurement operations. So, Mark or Alan, any last thoughts around this initiative?
Well, I think you've said it well, Eric. And, this has all the attributes to success, all the potential for success. But it'll take a hard work on both government and industry's part. We ought to be in it for the long haul, not the short haul. And if we are, then I think the benefits that we've talked about will be achieved, and some of the barriers and bumps along the road can be addressed with. It's got to be a partnership between government and industry.
Mark, any last
Sure.
thoughts?
And I'd like to expand that partnership. This is a partnership between all the federal agencies. We need to all be working together and figuring this out together, making sure that we're actually working in concert and with our industry partners. And frankly, if we work together in this process, I believe we can be smarter buyers for the American public. We can spend the dollar better. We can make sure that we're delivering the mission the public expects of us. And we can enhance the careers both on the public and the private side of those who participate and make this real.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank the audience for their participation in today's viewcast. For those of you who were unable to attend, or for colleagues that were unable to attend, GovExec will be emailing everyone a copy of the link to this viewcast that can then be forwarded to anyone who would wish to take a look at this viewcast. So with that, I want to thank our panelists.
Thank you.
And call it a wrap.
Thank you.